Today we are focusing on a critical component, the base plate. It's not just a part, it's a lesson in project management. The base plate is the foundation of our robotic arm. It's where everything starts, and it needs to be solid and well designed. Without a good base, the arm won't function properly. Think of the roots of a tree. If they're not strong, the whole thing falls over. By the end of this video, you'll see how I managed to simplify a big project into smaller, manageable parts. This approach isn't just for robotic arms, it's a skill you can apply to any complex project. So let's dive in and see how we can turn a challenging concept into a real working component. As I mentioned, breaking down this complex task was key to progress. So how did I tackle the base plate design? Well, I started by dividing it into different parts: the base plate itself, a mount for the stepper motor, a plate to rotate on, and a mount for the servo motor. This approach made the whole process much more manageable. When you're staring at a big complex project, it can be overwhelming. That's exactly how I felt at first. But here's what I learned. Instead of destroying my brain with this big task of designing all of these systems at once, I broke them down into tiny tasks. This strategy was a game changer for me, and I bet it could help you with your projects too. Now let's talk about some of the challenges I faced. One big issue was getting the height of the stepper motor just right. It needed to align perfectly with the other components. It was trickier than I expected. I ended up redesigning and reprinting parts multiple times before I got it right. But here's where breaking down the project really paid off. Instead of having to reprint the entire base plate every time I made a change, I could just focus on the specific part that needed to work. As I found out, for example, if the stepper motor itself is mounted incorrectly, I wouldn't have to make a 16-hour print to print the whole thing again. This saved me a ton of time and frustration. Speaking of time, let me give you an idea for the printing process. The base plate took me about 15 hours to print, while the part with the stepper motor mount only needed about 2 hours. This difference in printing time made it much easier to iterate and make adjustments quickly. Another problem I ran into was the stepper motor mount getting stuck and overheating. This actually melted the filament part, but because I had broken down the design, I could easily redesign and reprint the specific broken part without messing with the entire base plate. This approach of breaking things down didn't just help with the design or the printing, it made the whole project more manageable. When I encountered a problem, I could focus on fixing that specific issue without getting bogged down by the entire system. It's like troubleshooting a computer, you don't replace the whole thing when one part isn't working, right? So what have I learned since my last update? Well, splitting down the design into separate components has been a huge improvement. It's allowed me to make changes and fix problems much more effectively. I've saved time, reduced waste, and honestly, it kept me from getting too frustrated when things didn't work out perfectly at the first time. You might think breaking down the project into smaller parts would make everything smooth sailing. But let me tell you, the obstacles were still there waiting for me. The base plate turned out to be more complex than I initially thought. It needed to support the entire robotic arm and accommodate the stepper motor, all while ensuring stability and smooth rotation. Getting all these elements to work together was like solving a puzzle with pieces that kept changing shape. One of the biggest challenges I faced was the sheer time it took to print these components. The base plate alone required a 15-hour 3D print. Imagine waiting all the time only to find out that there's a small error in your design. It's not exactly a quick fix when you're dealing with such long printing times. Now you might be wondering how I dealt with these issues. Well, that's where the fun part comes in. Creative problem solving. For instance, when I was struggling with the ball grabber design, I came up with the idea to cut it into halves. This made printing easier and more reliable. I simply glued the halves together afterwards and voila, problem solved. Throughout this process, I've learned that modular design is key. When something goes wrong, and trust me, things will go wrong, you want to be able to fix them quickly. For example, when I had the issue with a specific part, I could reprint the entire piece. I could reprint that part in 20 to 50 minutes instead of reprinting the entire base, which would have taken 4 hours. This approach saved me countless hours and a lot of frustration. So what's the takeaway from this? Well, building a robotic arm or any other project is not a walk in the park. It's full of challenges, unexpected issues, and moments where you'll question why you started this project in the first place. But it's also incredibly rewarding. Each obstacle overcome is a lesson learned, and each solution brings you one step closer to your goal. If you are working on your projects and don't know how to solve a problem, or even don't know how to finish the entire project, I will help you finish your project. Just click the first link in the description. So what have I learned from this Baseplate adventure? Well, a lot. First off, breaking down complex projects into smaller tasks is a game changer. It makes everything more manageable and less overwhelming. Second, don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're not setbacks, they're learning opportunities. When the stepper motor melted the filament, it taught me a valuable lesson about heat management. For those of you who are starting similar projects, here's my advice. Plan ahead but be flexible. Your initial design will probably change, and that's okay. Embrace the iterative process. Also, invest into learning more about your project by watching YouTube videos and documentaries, or even buying courses and coaching to be even faster at finishing your project. Remember, every challenge you face is a chance to learn and improve. Keep pushing forward, keep experimenting, and don't give up. Your persistence will pay off. And before you know it, your projects are done. And again, if you have great ideas but don't know how to bring them to life, or you might be in the middle of your projects and don't know where to continue, I can help you with that. You just have to click the first link in the description, where it will take you to my page where you get more information about that. See you in the next one.